All right, this is a terrible story about a year in the making now. Human Rights Watch, Gaza's largest aid organization, UNRWA, provides shelter, health, and education services. The Israeli parliament is moving ahead with draft legislation that would prevent it from operating in the occupied Palestinian territory. So they are moving to ban UNRWA outright. Here's a video from Human Rights Watch to set this up.
The Israeli parliament is moving ahead with draft legislation that would prevent the UN aid agency for Palestinian refugees from operating in the occupied Palestinian territory. The United Nations Relief and Works Agency, known as UNRWA, is Gaza's largest aid organization. It provides shelter, health, and education services. It also provides services to Palestinian refugees in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, Lebanon, Syria, and Jordan. UNRWA was formed in 1949 after more than 700,000 Palestinians were expelled or fled from their homes in what Palestinians call the Nakba, the events that led to the creation of Israel.
UNRWA, more than ever, is indispensable. UNRWA, more than ever, is irreplaceable.
Earlier this year, Israeli authorities alleged that many UNRWA staff were involved in the October 7, 2023 attacks in southern Israel. But the UN investigated, and they found that only a tiny fraction of the Israeli allegations had any merit. At least 231 of its staff have been killed in Gaza since last October, but the agency continues to operate despite the risks. Its services are essential at a time when Palestinians are facing starvation with nowhere safe to go. Human Rights Watch has found that Israel has been using starvation as a weapon of war in Gaza and imposing collective punishment on its population. Both are war crimes. 90% of Gaza's population, that's 1.9 million people, have been displaced in the past year. They lacked food, water, shelter, healthcare, education, and safety. Governments that are truly concerned about the people starving in Gaza should demand that Israel withdraw its bills against UNRWA and support the agency best placed to help Palestinians.
So that was a great video. Some really just informative video work there. Just, we see some images that we don't usually see of the nuts and bolts of the operation there, which is why this is such a significant story. So Reuters has the print: Israel votes to ban UN aid agency. Palestinians say 100,000 residents trapped. Israel's parliament passed a law on Monday to ban the UN relief agency UNRWA from operating inside the country, alarming some of Israel's Western allies who fear it will worsen the already dire humanitarian crisis situation in Gaza. The head of UNRWA, Philippe Lazzarini, said the vote opposes the UN Charter and violates international law. Quote, "This is the latest in the ongoing campaign to discredit UNRWA and delegitimize its role towards providing human development assistance and services to Palestine refugees," he wrote on X. The vote came the same day Israeli tanks thrust deeper into northern Gaza, trapping 100,000 civilians, the Palestinian Emergency Service said, in what Israel's military said were operations to eliminate regrouping Hamas militants. Remember when Biden said that Rafah was going to be a red line, right? Because of what that was going to be?
Yeah.
Rafah, that's in the south, of course. Now they're back in the north doing what people feared they were going to do with Rafah then, which is just trapping people in and saying past this certain point, if we see you, you are assumed to be a combatant. The surrender or starve protocol. No aid in, trapping people in, no press gets in. Just absolutely monstrous and horrific. The Israeli military... Go ahead.
It is one of the greatest crimes against humanity in the post-World War II era, and it's our ally.
Yep. And it's our ally. And it's an election year, and you hear very little about it relative to what you should. I'm not going to say it's not a major story in the news. It is, but relative to what you should be hearing, it's not. That's why the Jeremy Scahill thing was such a cathartic thing. You saw him saying, "How could you not begin every conversation about this election screaming this has to stop?"
Right.
Like everything else just seems so unreal. It just seems like such a fantasy world to not have this dominate to the point, to almost to the exclusion of everything else. The Israeli military said soldiers captured around 100 suspected militants in a raid on a hospital in the Jabalia camp. Hamas and medics have denied any militant presence. at the hospital. The Gaza Strip's health ministry said at least 19 people were killed by Israeli airstrikes and bombardment on Monday. The Palestinian Civil Emergency Service said around 100,000 people were marooned in Jabalia, Beit Lahia, and Beit Hanun without medical or food supplies. Reuters could not verify the number independently. The emergency service said its operations had come to a halt because of the 3-week Israeli assault into northern Gaza. That's right, no aid has gotten in since the beginning of this month, where Israel had said it wiped out Hamas combat forces earlier in the year-long war. That's right, making the round yet again. Talks led by the U.S., Egypt, and Qatar to broker a ceasefire resumed on Sunday after multiple abortive attempts. Egypt's president proposed a 2-day truce to exchange 4 Israeli hostages held by Hamas for Palestinian prisoners, followed by talks within 10 days on a permanent ceasefire. Netanyahu had said mediators would resume talks in coming days in a continued attempt to advance a deal. Israel has repeatedly said the war will go on until Hamas is eradicated, while the Islamist movement has ruled out any end to fighting until Israeli forces leave Gaza. So in the midst of this, like I said, headline story here, Israel votes to ban the most robust aid agency, from operating within its borders, meaning within the occupied territories. And so the implications of that are, of course, extremely dire. This isn't the first scare we've had. UNRWA almost went bankrupt earlier this year, came very, very close to being a defunct organization by this point. Thankfully, it is not. But now they face, I won't even say a legal challenge. They are facing, an existential threat here. If they are banned from operating, the consequences of that are beyond dire, especially given the situation in the north of Gaza right now, which has only been compounding over this past month.
Right. Yeah. Every step that they take, you just wind up saying, how far can they go before the U.S. media and the U.S. political class will stop pretending this is not what it is?
Right.
It's not hyperbole to compare this to the Nazis,
No.
to Pinochet, to the worst regimes, many of which we've condemned. We consider the ultimate symbols of evil, although we backed Pinochet, so it should be no surprise. Yeah, I'm honestly, I'm a little surprised they didn't do this before. If you look at, we did that piece on the Israeli comic on the Rumble side, so-called comic, and he had a bit that I looked at about UNRWA and about how they're terrorists and how he was celebrating that that they had been thrown out of the West Bank. It's so clear that their intention is from the river to the sea.
Of course.
They're just taking this opportunity to make sure that life is unlivable for these people and to kill as many of them as possible while they can.
Please clap.